What would you do if a stranger stopped you and told you your daughter isn't sick, that she's being poisoned by someone you trust? Because that's exactly what happened. And I still can't shake it. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in Chapultepec Park. Don Ernesto Salgado was pushing his daughter's wheelchair down a path he knew by heart. He'd walked it every day for weeks. The wheels crushed dry leaves with every step. Neither of them spoke. Valeria was 17. She used to run down these same paths laughing, her long, dark hair flying behind her. Now she could barely lift her head. Her hair was gone, completely shaved. An IV bag hung beside her chair. Her skin had gone pale, almost translucent, like something was draining out of her slowly, quietly, without anyone noticing. Ernesto leaned down and whispered, "Stay strong, hija. This will pass. You'll get better." But even from where I stood, I could tell he didn't believe it. And then, everything broke. Footsteps, fast, bare feet on gravel, uneven, desperate. A boy came running out of the trees, thin, dirty, clothes torn at the shoulder. But his eyes weren't empty. They were locked in, focused, like someone who had been waiting a long time to say something and had finally run out of reasons not to. He stopped right in front of them, chest heaving. And he said something that froze the world in place. "Your daughter isn't sick." His voice cracked on the last word, but he didn't stop. "It's your fiancée." She shaved her head. Nobody moved, not for a full second. Ernesto's hands tightened around the wheelchair handles. His knuckles went white. What did you say?" he whispered. That's when Valeria looked up, for the first time in days, and something flickered in her eyes. Not just fear, something deeper, like a memory trying to find its way back to the surface. "I saw it, senor," the boy said, swallowing hard. "I hide near her house. One night I saw everything." He didn't get to finish. "Ernesto, don't listen to him." The voice came from behind them. Smooth, controlled. Lucia, always perfect, always put together. But her face wasn't calm anymore. Something behind her eyes had shifted. "This boy is lying," she said quickly, stepping forward and grabbing Ernesto's arm. "He probably wants money. You know how these kids are." The boy shook his head. Tears were running down his face now. "No, senora, I'm not lying. The girl was always kind to me." He paused. Her mother, too. Ernesto went still. His late wife, the only woman he had ever truly loved. "Dad," Valeria whispered, her voice barely there. I remember something." Lucia moved fast, too fast. "Sweetheart, you're confused. It's the medication." The boy looked straight at her. "What medication?" Silence. Not a comfortable silence. The heavy kind. The kind that presses down on your chest. Even the wind seemed to stop. "What doctor is treating her, senor?" the boy asked, turning back to Ernesto. "Because I heard her on the phone. She said the doctor has gambling debts." And that's when the ground shifted beneath Ernesto's feet. Because he hadn't chosen the doctor. He hadn't chosen the treatment, the pills, the specialists. He had been grieving, exhausted, terrified. And Lucia had stepped in and handled everything. All of it. "Where did you hear that?" Ernesto asked, his voice barely holding together. "Because I watch," the boy said quietly. "If I don't survive." Lucia let out a short laugh, dry, practiced. "This is ridiculous. Let's go." But this time, Ernesto didn't move. For the first time in weeks, he really looked at her. And something didn't add up. A lot didn't add up. "Dad," Valeria whispered, gripping his hand tight. I felt someone touch my head at night, when I was half asleep. Lucia froze, just for a second, but it was enough. The boy stepped closer and lowered his voice. That's not all, senor. I saw her in the yard late at night. He paused. She was burning the hair. The air changed. Ernesto turned toward Lucia slowly. Lucia, he said, low, cold. What is going on? She didn't answer. And that silence, that short, cursed silence, was worse than anything she could have said. Then the boy whispered, if you don't believe me, I can show you where she hides everything. I saw it happen in real time. The fear that crossed her face. Real fear. The kind you can't perform. And that's when Ernesto understood, the thought forming slowly, then all at once, like ice cracking underfoot. That maybe his daughter had never been sick at all. Maybe she had been made sick, quietly, deliberately, by someone sleeping under the same roof. But here's the thing. What that boy knew, that was only the part of the truth safe enough to say out loud. The real secret was still inside that house, and it was darker than any of them were ready for. The words hung in the air, not the peaceful kind of silence, the suspicious kind, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Ernesto didn't look away from the boy. Take us inside, he said. The living room. The boy nodded. My name is Mateo, he said quietly, like he'd been waiting for someone to ask. No one had asked. Lucia followed them in, and with every step she grew paler. She was talking. She didn't stop talking, insisting they needed to discuss this privately, that this wasn't necessary, that Ernesto was overreacting. Her voice stayed smooth, practiced, but her hands gave her away. Ernesto wasn't listening. He went straight up the stairs, down the hall, into the master bedroom, and directly to the small white cabinet in the corner, the one he had walked past 100 times without a second thought. He held out his hand. The key. I left it downstairs, Lucia said. He didn't move, didn't repeat himself. Just held out his hand and waited. It wasn't a request this time. Her hands were trembling when she finally reached into her pocket and pulled out a small gold key. The lock clicked open. It sounded like a gunshot in that quiet room. Ernesto opened the cabinet door, and his world split in half. Vials, white powder, syringes, medications with the labels torn off, every single one of them. And then, in the back corner, a lock of long, dark hair, tied carefully. Kept like a trophy. Valeria's hair. The nausea hit him like a physical thing. He gripped the edge of the cabinet and whispered, "Oh my God." Behind him, Mateo quietly pulled a chair closer to the doorway and sat down without a word. Like someone who had learned long ago that the best thing you can do in a dangerous room is stay near the exit. And in that moment, the thought that had been forming in the back of Ernesto's mind, the one he kept pushing away because it was too terrible, too enormous, finally locked into place. His daughter had never been sick. She had been made sick, slowly, deliberately, by someone who kissed him goodnight and sat across from him at dinner and called Valeria sweetheart. But even that, was only the surface of it. The part that could still be processed, still be named. He could feel it, somewhere in the walls of that house, that the real darkness hadn't shown itself yet. He closed the cabinet, turned around. "We're leaving," he said, "right now." His voice was different, not the voice of a man asking questions anymore. The voice of a father who had just understood exactly what was at stake. Valeria drew a shaky breath and tightened her grip on the armrests. Mateo stood up and hesitated. "Can I come with you?" Ernesto looked at him for a long moment. This boy, barefoot, torn clothes, no one waiting for him anywhere. "If you're lying," Ernesto said quietly, "you'll regret it." He paused. "But if you're telling the truth, you just saved my daughter's life." Mateo didn't say anything. He just nodded once and followed them out. Lucia made one last attempt, her voice sharp now, the elegance finally cracking at the edges. She called it madness, said he was seriously going to trust a homeless kid over her, said he would feel foolish when this was all over. He didn't respond. He didn't even turn around. And when they stepped through the front door of the Salgado house, the silence that greeted them was immediate. Total. The kind of quiet that doesn't mean nothing is happening. The kind that means something already has. "What happens next?" Ernesto asked. Lucia smiled. "And I need you to understand, it wasn't a nervous smile. It wasn't the smile of someone caught, someone desperate, someone scrambling for a way out. It was calm, almost gentle. Valeria will recover," she said, "and you'll spend the rest of your life grateful to me." The room went still. "And when I'm no longer useful to you," she continued, her voice never changing, "I'll simply take half of everything and move on." Ernesto stared at her, like he was looking at someone he had never seen before, because he was. He forced himself to speak. "How many times?" he said slowly. "How many times have you done this?" She hesitated, just for a moment. "3. The word dropped like a stone. Silence, the deep kind, the kind that fills in everything around it. And then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "One of the children didn't survive." Valeria broke first. A sound came out of her, not quite a sob, something rawer than that. And she covered her face with both hands. Mateo didn't move. He just stood there, completely still, his jaw locked, his fists hanging at his sides. Rage with nowhere to go. Ernesto felt something crack open in the center of his chest. "You're a monster," he whispered. Lucia's composure finally slipped. She sank down, tears coming now, but they were too late, and everyone in that room knew it. She started talking, mumbling something about just wanting money, wanting a better life, wanting to stop being afraid of having nothing. "A child died." Mateo's voice, quiet, flat, just 3 words, but they cut through everything. Valeria was shaking now. She looked down at her own hands, the hands that had held an IV line for weeks, and whispered, "What did you do to me?" "I didn't," Lucia started. "Look at her." Ernesto's voice came out like something that had been locked away for a long time, and finally forced its way through. "Don't look at me. Look at your daughter. She's not mine. Look at her." The room flinched. Valeria was crying, but not from pain. Something worse than pain. She looked at Lucia, and her voice came out broken, barely holding its shape. "I trusted you," she said. "I called you Mom." That was the moment something finally gave way inside Lucia. Her head dropped, her shoulders fell, and the truth, the real truth, began to come out, slowly, like something that had been buried under pressure for a very long time. Ernesto waited until she went quiet. Then he asked the only question left. "Why?" His voice cracked on the single syllable. Lucia looked up, and the thing that looked back at him through her eyes wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It wasn't even regret. It was calculation. "Because it works," she said simply. She said it the way you'd explain something obvious to someone who'd been slow to understand. "Men like him," she explained. wealthy, carrying grief, drowning in guilt over a daughter they couldn't fix. They were easy. Fear made them dependent. Suffering made them obedient. A sick child made a man sign things without reading them, agree to things without thinking, rush toward marriage because it felt like stability, like salvation, like something solid to hold on to while the ground kept shifting. Mateo's fists tightened until his knuckles went white. Valeria couldn't stop shaking, and Ernesto stood there, completely still, as the full shape of it assembled itself in his mind. Piece by piece, cold and precise and absolutely devastating. His daughter had never been sick. She had been made sick. Carefully, deliberately. Dosed and weakened and stripped down until she became the perfect instrument of someone else's plan. Valeria hadn't been his child in that scheme. She'd been the lever. Ernesto let out a long, slow breath. The kind you don't realize you've been holding for weeks. He looked at Mateo, this boy, barefoot in a stranger's house, who had run out of the trees with nothing but the truth and the courage to say it out loud. And he asked quietly, "Do you want to stay with us?" Mateo blinked, searched his face, looking for the catch. "Do you mean that?" "Your family," Ernesto said. Valeria reached over and touched Mateo's hand. "You saved my life," she said softly. Mateo looked at them both, and for the first time since any of this had started, his face did something it clearly hadn't done in a long time. It came undone. Then, "Yeah," he whispered. When the police arrived that night, Ernesto didn't hesitate. There were no negotiations, no private conversations, no second chances, no last-minute mercy. Just a father standing in his doorway with absolute certainty in his voice. "There are things that can't be fixed," he told them. "What she did is one of them." Lucia was taken away without elegance, without control. Every mask she had ever worn, the grief counselor's warmth, the devoted partner, the concerned future stepmother, gone. All of it. What was left underneath was something none of them wanted to look at for long. The weeks that followed were quiet in a different way than before. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of that house under Lucia's watch. Something gentler. The quiet of a place slowly remembering what it used to be. Valeria stopped taking everything Lucia had given her. One by one, the pills disappeared. The IV came out. And little by little, not all at once, not dramatically, just steadily. She came back. Color returned to her face first, then strength to her hands, then the ability to walk to the kitchen without stopping to rest. Small things, enormous things. Her smile came back last. It was different than before. Quieter, more careful, like something that had been broken and reset and would never sit exactly the same way again. But it was real. More real, maybe, than it had ever been. One morning she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, running her fingers slowly through her short hair, just starting to grow back, soft and new, and said to no one in particular, "I'm not the same anymore." Mateo was leaning in the doorway. He'd taken to doing that, just being nearby, not intruding, just present. He looked at her in the mirror and said, "You're stronger." She didn't argue. Ernesto was in the hallway when it happened. He watched them, his daughter and this boy who had appeared out of nowhere with bare feet and a truth too big for any adult in that park to see. And he felt something in his chest finally, fully release. He breathed in. Actually breathed. Not the shallow, braced kind of breathing he'd been doing for months, waiting for the next piece of bad news. Real breathing. The kind that means, for just this moment, you are not afraid. What they had now wasn't the life he'd planned. It was smaller in some ways, and in others, it was larger than anything he knew how to name. It wasn't just survival. It was a second chance. And this time, he knew exactly how rare that was. Someone once asked me what I would do if a stranger stopped me in a park and told me something I didn't want to hear. I think about Ernesto. I think about Mateo. And I hope I'd stop walking.